This is the sports betting panel here. We'll do quick introductions and get into the conversation. Right here we have Joe Asher, the CEO of William Hill's U.S. operations, a man who's been in the gaming industry since he was 16 years old, I believe, on the far couch. Tom Rogers, executive chairman of WinView, and in a previous life, the brains behind TiVo, which fundamentally changed the way that we consume media. On the far end, Dr. Laila Mintas, deputy president of Sportradar, in a previous life, investigating corruption in global soccer, which I think means that every job you have moving forward will be easier than that one. We're here to talk about the future of sports media, or sports gambling. You guys are all in the gambling world, but also at your core, all technology companies in your own right. I want to start getting competitive and creative juices flowing. Give us a sense of something that's not happening in sports gambling right now that you think in 5 years, given the growth we're going to see in the U.S., that we may be seeing.
Well, look, I'll take the first shot at it. It's happened, does happen in Europe. It's not happening here in the U.S. But the streaming of video into mobile apps, so that when you're sitting, you can watch the game on your app, and the betting options appear right in front of you. In-game betting or in-play betting is a big part of the business. And today in the U.S., you're watching on TV and betting on the app. But I think in the next several years, we'll get to the point where the content is being streamed directly into the app, and so the top half is the screen, and the bottom half is the betting options.
Well, I agree with Joe on that. I think mobile betting, where you're playing on your smartphone, watching the game live on television, and ultimately being integrated into a single screen will definitely happen. I think a lot of the things, when you think 5 years out, that are going to happen as this begins to take shape and mature, is making it more exciting for the television viewer and the fan while they're betting. It can be a very solitary experience, and your satisfaction is your wallet gets bigger because you're winning some money. But you gamble on a slot machine, and all kinds of bells and whistles go off, or you're playing blackjack at a table, and you get the social interaction of other people telling you how well you're doing or not how well you're doing. And I think that the play-along experience, where much of the gambling revenue is going to come from, is going to need to take advantage of AR and VR to give somebody a sense that if they're doing well, there's a cheering section and the stadium goes wild, and you have some sense of you're a participant in something bigger than simply your pocketbook getting bigger. I also think it will emerge in a way that has fan bases playing more and more against each other. Again, getting it away from the solitary experience, allowing people to connect to fans in a way that betting becomes something of a broader social nature, where you have fan enthusiasts playing against each other in some way.
Yeah, we see the same trends on a global level. So Sportradar is an international company in 30 locations around the globe. And we are the betting provider when it comes to sports data and sports betting data. And we see the trend on a global level is that 70% of all the users are playing in betting, so really online betting, watching a game and then placing a bet watching the game. And that's a global trend, and that's what we hope that we can achieve also in the US. It comes down to legislation at the end of the day, because the states need to allow that's possible, but we are fighting all hard for that, I guess. And the other thing that we think is really interesting is making betting more a social event, that you can take a bet, you can compare yourself with your friends, you can share the bet on social media. So right now, it's a pretty fragmented experience. So you go to a website, or you take a mobile app, and you watch the game first on broadcast, then you take your mobile phone, you place a bet, and then you share that on Twitter or other social channels. And it's kind of like making that experience less fragmented and also more personalized, that you get offers that you want as a fan, that basically you get them when you want them. I think that's probably the power that we will be seeing over the course of the next years.
So you all mentioned mobile, which is a topic that's come up kind of throughout the day here in different ways. I'm curious to ask the audience, Raise your hand if you've placed a legal bet here in the U.S., either in Nevada or in one of the other jurisdictions. Keep your hand up if you placed it on a mobile phone. So there's 2 or 3 of you left. If I were to ask that question in the UK, everybody's hand would stay up. It's such a big part of the culture and the betting over there. How do we get mobile to kind of, as we expand in the US, how do we keep mobile front and center as it goes?
Oh, I think that's inevitable. I mean, mobile betting will come to certainly a good chunk of the country in relatively short order. New Jersey is now just going live with mobile. It's fairly well ingrained in Nevada. We do about 64% of our business on a mobile app.
When did you launch your mobile app in Vegas?
Sort of legacy versions of it have been in the market since about 2011. Okay. Maybe even slightly earlier than that, but it's obviously it grows substantially. Retail is still growing, but it's single-digit growth. But the big growth, of course, is in mobile. And I sort of analogize it a little bit to banking in that there's Bank of Americas everywhere. I happen to bank with Bank of America for no particular reason, and that's just what I do. But there's sort of the branches, and you can go into the branch if you really want to see somebody. You can get money out of the ATM, but you do most of it on mobile these days, I think. But they all sort of support each other, and so I think you'll see sort of retail existing clearly, but the real growth, of course, is online and a mobile.
When you look at Europe, where Joe's company is very active, you see well over $100 billion of consumer handle that is generated off of sports betting, and as Laila said, 70% or so of that on the mobile phone. And there's absolutely no reason to think that isn't going to develop in the United States as the primary source of where gambling revenue comes from. The issue is between now and when that really begins to take shape, how long a period of time is that? And the state-by-state legalization of sports gambling is probably going to be a somewhat slower process than all the hubbub that's taken place about how sports gambling is going to be so enormous here. And along that path, you got all kinds of interests that are going to be trying to get their piece, which I think from a regulatory point of view at state legislatures is probably going to slow that down. And part of slowing that down will be when mobile emerges in each of those states that do legalize. At WinView, our role in that is to try to catalyze mobile gaming for money as a game of skill, meaning it's legal in most of the country today, and you don't have to wait for the process of state-by-state laws allowing gambling. And we are up and running today, allowing you to play basketball, baseball, football, hockey, a number of other sports, where you're playing along, betting on proposition, so to speak, but your bets are part of a broader game where it's not characterized as gambling, but as a game of skill. And we think that offering that on a large-scale basis will kind of get the market good and ready for when mobile sports gambling comes in any particular state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We also think sponsorship is a good opportunity. So everyone is speaking about tax revenues for the states, but then also for the operators, of course, to do legitimate business in the US. But I think sponsorship is also something that's probably a little bit underestimated at the moment in the US. So from our internal numbers, bookmakers usually spend about 25% on their revenues back into sports. And they are targeting, of course, live events. So you can think about stadium banners and things like that, jerseys, sponsorship on jerseys of the players. But then also, just to give you an idea, so Bet365, one of our customers, probably is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, online bookmaker worldwide. If they would spend 25% of their revenues back into sport, we are speaking about $700 to $800 million a year. So it's a big, big revenue stream. And what I like always to give as an example, I'm originally from Germany, and we had a goalkeeper in the Bundesliga and very famous Oliver Kahn, at least in Germany, and he signed up a deal after he had finished his career in soccer, and basically with Tipico, where he said, place your bet with Tipico and your bet is in safe hands. So these kinds of things, I think it's something that probably will be kind of brought to the US as well.
That's a good segue, because there are NBA athletes here, there are other athletes in the audience here. Some of them have asked me today, what kind of role can an athlete, while playing or after, like you just mentioned with Oliver Kahn, what kind of role can athletes kind of play in this ecosystem as it starts to get off the ground more?
Well, I think it's really limitless and up to what specific people want to do. Clearly, as players, there's going to be sponsorship revenue that should flow to the leagues and to the teams, and being sure that gets addressed in the collective bargaining agreements is going to become more and more and more important. Certainly, when they retire, you have the sponsorship type deals, whether it's commercials that you see people doing on the street. Yeah, Barkley. We did one with Pete Rose a number of years ago. One of the things too that we always like to do are things that are really you can't just buy it type of things, and so organizing events where fans can meet a retired player or something like that, I think is significant, and then just whatever the interest level is. Obviously, look, there's going to be a lot of investment. There's already a fair bit of investment into this space now that's going to continue in the coming years. A friend of mine, Wayne Kimmel, just invested in a company, Vegas Sports and Information Network. That's Brett Musburger's sort of post-broadcasting endeavor. And you can certainly see players taking the role of broadcasters in some businesses like that. It's really, in my mind, sort of limitless, and it's really up to what people are interested in doing and what they want to pursue.
I think from our point of view, what athletes can and can't do, how the leagues and the collective bargaining agreement shake out on all that, I think it's a bit of a question mark. But certainly, as what we are today as a platform, a game of skill, where you're perfectly legal to participate as a promoter or marketer of fans getting involved and predicting in-game what's going to happen. And our games are a quarter long, so promoting people in on any given quarter. Certainly in the sports that athletes are not direct participants in. For instance, we had Floyd Mayweather do some very effective social media for us, just Facebook and Instagram based, and totally unrelated to boxing, even though we do have UFC as a game of skill, and enormously effective as a marketer in a very cheap, easy way to get the word out. And so I think in a marketing promotional role where they're sharing in revenue from the users that they're generating from today's games of skill, before you get into the more complicated questions of where athletes are going to be allowed to participate in betting, that's here today as an opportunity.
So in the same way that we saw the NBA have a $25 million deal with MGM, part of that was a licensing deal to use it, and NBA marks, players can possibly do the same thing with their own likeness.
There are any number of ways to structure it, but I actually think individual athletes are far more effective at talking to their fans and their audience than a league mark is. And so I actually think that individual athletes can participate in a way that's far more useful for somebody like us building a business than the league's participation per se.
And for a lot of these things, from your perspective, we're moving state by state. It's not going as fast as I think some people thought. We're 5 months past the Supreme Court decision. 2 states now, or maybe 3, are actually offering. It's going to be a while before we hit a critical mass of states by any means. Does that make your job harder as you navigate specific jurisdictions? And I know because of Wire Act and different laws, a lot of those things can't cross state lines.
Yeah, look, I don't think it's going particularly slow. I don't sort of see it that way, maybe because we're like on the other side ramping up in a big kind of way real fast. So you had sports betting in Nevada. Delaware launched full sports betting a couple weeks after the Supreme Court's decision. New Jersey in mid-June started with retail. Mobile's just launching now in New Jersey. Mississippi is up and going now. I'm probably the only guy doing the San Francisco to Jackson, Mississippi jaunt this week. I'm off to Jackson and appear in front of the Mississippi
Direct
Gaming.
flight or no?
Not quite a direct flight. To appear in front of the Mississippi Gaming Commission on Thursday, which we're very much looking forward to. West Virginia is going to be getting going pretty soon. Pennsylvania is also a this year state. I think Rhode Island is likely to go this year as well. So there's quite a number of states going, and then you see bills pending in a bunch of states. Obviously, there was a lot of movement around a bill in New York that ultimately did not pass. You would expect that to be taken up again in fairly short order. I think you got places like Ohio and Iowa and Indiana and Illinois where there's some discussion around legislation. So I think it's actually, from our perspective as the operator, who's sort of trying to ramp up and get into these states as quickly yet responsibly as we can. There's a heck of a lot going on, but it's going to take a bit of time to play out because each state's different. We talked about mobile earlier. Mobile is legal in New Jersey. In Mississippi, it's only going to be legal on the premises of the properties. You have to go to the casino to bet on mobile, so obviously it's going to be very, very small. In Nevada, the requirement is you have to go to a casino to sign up for your mobile account, but then you can bet anywhere within the state. Right? That's one model, works pretty well in Nevada, where you have a deep concentration of casinos. New Jersey, you can just sign up remotely on the app itself, and so it'll take a few years to play out. There's legislative considerations in each of these states too. Who gets the licenses, right? Who gets to be the operator? Is it the incumbent casino companies? Is it the racetracks? Is it both? Is it somebody else? Right? All those types of issues have to get sorted out. And then there's just different legislative priorities in different states. So I think it's actually moving at a pretty good clip now, and it's just going to continue into next year because one of the things you haven't seen since the Supreme Court decision is there really hasn't been any type of major opposition or blowback to what's happened, right? I mean, I think largely the public has accepted it from a policy perspective, and it's moving forward. And so for a state looking to raise tax revenue, right? I mean, the choices are cut services or raise taxes. Legalizing sports betting becomes a pretty convenient way to generate additional revenue for the state.
So I'll tell you where the speed of this really matters. As a business, we're indifferent because we're a game of skill with a massive patent portfolio that's indifferent to whether they're games of skill or games of chance gambling. And as that transitions, we look at that as we can participate on both sides. But where it matters is to the industry. And when you say mobile, what you're really saying is it's television-centric. It's people playing along while they're watching television. And that whole process...
Or at the game, by the way.
Could be at the game as well, but I think the vast amount of revenue that will come out of television viewers in-game is going to be an enormous new source of revenue. And what is happening very quickly is the decline of the current sources of revenue that support the sports industry. Sports industry, as everybody knows, is supported by television rights contracts. And when you see the underpinnings of the current television industry declining, ESPN subs down by 17 million in the last few years. Ratings for all sports declining, with the exception of the NBA. Advertising revenue obviously follows from that. And so the pillars that have supported TV sports rights contracts, which supports the entire television industry, is in decline. At the same time, you have new players looking to bid on sports, the Facebooks, the Amazons, the Googles. And that is the issue is going to be who grabs the one new source of revenue that's coming, which is sports gaming, sports gambling. And the grabbing of that is a critical issue in terms of who's going to control distribution. So while the transition to sports gambling can be a somewhat slower process in terms of state by state, the issue of alignment and being ready to be able to grab your fair share of that revenue is something people have to worry about near term. And it also is a question of where athletes participate, how quickly they align in terms of that.
And Laila, I wanted to piggyback off of that. Part of what Sportradar does is, sell data packages to TV networks to kind of enhance their own production and the way they broadcast games. How quickly are we going to see in America drastic changes to the way that an NBA fan watches NBA games on TV?
Yeah, I think the overall trend is, as you said, that the ratings on TV are going down. We see that at a lot of sports, for example, NFL. So people, especially the younger generations, they don't want to watch a 4-hour game anymore. So the idea is to give them a visualization on their mobile phone where they can place a bet, where they can watch the game in a different angle of the game. These are data visualizations that Sportradar, for example, provides. But I think there are also studies out there that prove that if you give people the opportunity to bet on a game, that they watch more games and they watch them for a longer time period. So there's value in there for the TV networks if betting becomes hopefully broader, legalized in the other states that are missing so far. But overall, it's an interesting revenue stream for the entire sports industry. So I think all the different stakeholders will benefit somehow from it. TV networks are able to charge more. There will be advertising on TV for betting one day. There will be probably betting or bookmakers doing jersey sponsorship one day. That's all normal in Europe or other parts of the world, and I think that will come over to the US pretty quick. And what we've been seeing is that the US is kind of catching up pretty quickly with the new developments. So I think initially there was kind of a hype that everyone thought it would go very fast. But I think now we have a realistic picture on where we are standing right now, and there is a lot of revenue for all the different stakeholders. It comes really down from our perspective now to have the right legal requirements and the legal framework in place to allow everyone to monetize and benefit from that situation.
I want to open it up to questions in a second, but last question for you guys right now. The other part of the topic of this panel is fantasy sports. Are there lessons that the sports gambling world maybe learned from everything that's happened in daily fantasy in the past 3 or 4 years, either from a regulatory standpoint, from an advertising blitz standpoint? What did you guys take away from what was a crazy couple years in daily fantasy?
Well, I think the daily fantasy clearly helped, in my mind, the coming of legalizing traditional forms of sports betting, and you can debate whether or not daily fantasy was ever legal before the Supreme Court ruled. But clearly it gave the broadcaster and the leagues a taste of the money that was to be had in sports betting. And you could not have been in the United States in September 2000, I think it was 2015, and the advertising barrage was it was brutal. I mean, you didn't even want to watch TV because like every 90 seconds, I think it was like a commercial for one of the daily fantasy sites.
Are you guys going to do that? Is that
look, certainly that's, we'll see what, I think the New Jersey market is going to be a pretty marketing competitive and intensive market. We'll see what what that transpires to, but keep in mind it is going to be state by state as opposed to national. So is it really effective to be buying national spots for sports betting in the current environment? I think that our focus is very much regionally from sponsorships perspectives. We're talking to a number of different teams who have approached us around doing something obviously in the relevant markets. And so fantasy really I think pushed along the conversation towards legalizing sports betting. Whether any of the 6 justices on the Supreme Court who voted to overturn PASPA were thinking about it at the time, who knows? But I think it's one of the reasons we got to where we did on the time frame that we did.
The key thing about fantasy sports was it taught everybody that user acquisition costs matter. And you can't just spend thinking you're in a cool industry and it doesn't matter what the cost of a user is. They overspent and they didn't market appropriately, which, coming back to the role of players in driving marketing, can be done much more efficiently than the way they did it. Take another model, which gives me an enormous amount of confidence in how mobile gaming for sports develops, HQ Trivia. You got 2 or 3 million people showing up for a live game every night to answer questions, how many baby kangaroos does a kangaroo have? And people are finding 20 minutes in their night to sit there. If they win, they get $6.95. And here in sports, you got people who much rather predict whether Jaylen Brown's going to score his next 3, win a whole lot more money. You don't have to carve out 20 minutes at 9 o'clock at night because you're showing up to watch the game anyway. And it shows, I think, there's an enormous appetite to be able to take mobile live and exploit it in a big way that fantasy never understood. HQ Trivia spent a fraction on building that 2 to 3 million that the fantasy sports guys spent building that.
Are there questions? We've got 3 minutes, but we'd love to get a few in. Yeah, in the back.
Any fear on what kind of effect it could have on athletes, and most notably college athletes? We saw all this stuff being done as far as draft money
Do you want to take that?
Did
you hear the question?
Yeah.
Any fear that, especially for college athletes, that there may be athletes susceptible, correct me if this is right, susceptibility to athletes, especially college ones who aren't compensated certainly in the way that professional ones are?
Yeah, from an integrity standpoint, we provide integrity services to the leagues, including NBA and others. And what we think is a bit critical with college sports in general is that athletes are not paid. So there's a potential incentive for organized crime to actually come and approach these young players. And I worked myself at CONCACAF for a couple of years, which is a soccer administration body, including the U.S., but also Mexico and other countries. And we had actually people coming into under 16, under 17 competition, approaching these athletes and offering them money to throw a game. And we were able to prove that these people made millions on the Asian bookmaking online market with fixing these events. And therefore, I think there's a potential risk, but I think it's something that needs to be regulated in a smart way. And I think the easiest way is to just pay the athletes. As common sense for me coming from Europe, but seems to be not so common sense here in the US.
Let's do actually one more before we go. We got about a minute.
Sports leagues will be successful receiving rights fees for use of the marks?
Well, certainly the NBA just did a deal with MGM, and you'd have to ask MGM what motivated that deal. There are a lot of pieces to it, clearly, but it does show that there's interest on the gaming industry side of working with the leagues. Certainly, we've been in discussions with some of the leagues about doing some things. Clearly, there's intellectual property. I mean, look, here's the thing about it, right? If our customers are all sports fans, right? Now, not everybody who watches a game is betting the game, but pretty much anybody who's betting it is a fan. And so our fans are their fans, and so we get that. And there's obviously some areas of disagreement, but broadly speaking, there's a lot of business to be done together.
I think the leagues will benefit if they are playing a promotional role driving users to gaming and betting. And relying on the marks as the tool to do that alone in an active gaming betting environment, I'm not sure that will be the most meaningful part of what they can do to participate in the industry. I think the people that have to worry more about how they participate in the industry, though, are the current players within the television ecosystem, the ESPNs, the Foxes. Those are guys who have a huge new challenge. leagues and players will do fine regardless of whether the Facebooks and Googles are aggressively in or not. Those guys could be significantly undermined if they can't figure out the right role for them to grab revenue as this emerges.
Awesome. A lot more to cover, but unfortunately we're out of time. Thank you guys.